Good morning. We are in Exodus lesson 3a. We are going to be covering chapters 7 and 8 of Exodus. We have had such a rich study, and it's so deep. And I feel like I want to go back now and do all those chapters over again. Now that I've got my feet set, my bearings, now I can see the depth of doctrinal teachings that are just layered in here, and we could never possibly begin to touch on all of them. I found two major doctrinal things this week alone that I want to dive into, and I found one, I think, the week before that. But I tell you, I don't know how you could possibly begin to really parse out all the richness that's in here. It is beyond comprehension. The tentacles of what's being set down in these books of both Genesis and Exodus up to this point are so far reaching. They go all the way to the book of Revelation. And much of them are greatly emphasized in Revelation, right? So as we are considering that, just know that as we walk through the unfolding literary form that we're looking at, I don't want you to think that I'm not aware that there is so much more and that there is so much more that could be said. We just cannot possibly handle it all in one lesson, but we will do what's most important, and we will hopefully get to a place where you feel like you're comfortable with it. Now, with that said, concerning the richness of all that we have been looking at, I want to do very quickly, as a lead in, to get your brains back into all of this, I want to go back to, I think it's chapter 6. Yes, chapter 6. Because I think chapter 6 was a real pivotal segment division move by God, where he lays down some historical information in those first 5 chapters that just kind of put us in the mode and the thinking of what's going on with God and his people Israel at that point in history. But then in chapter 6, he does this, I think, very strategic move where he says, now I'm going to present myself to them as the Lord. And so we spoke about that verse 3, he says, and God spoke further to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord, and I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, Lord, I did not make myself known to them. So another way of saying this sentence would be, but I'm going to make myself known now as Lord to them. And does anybody remember why or what that is inferring, or what is the point to him saying that now I'm going to be made known as Lord? I'm going to show them what that means. Covenant. Okay, so there's the covenant aspect of it that's deeply embedded in that name, the Lord. Mm-hmm.
No, but what he does.
What he's going to do for the covenant, but what I'm saying, my emphasis is on the name.
Oh,
the name, because now I know what he's going to do, and you and I all, and it's been repeated already up to this point, but in chapter 6 he makes this switch from the events, because see, people, aren't we distracted by events? Isn't that what holds us down? We get into circumstances, and it's like nothing else is going on around us. We miss the spiritual point of things sometimes because we're consumed by circumstances. And especially as we are moving forward after chapter 6, we start getting into the signs that God begins to do in order to show that he is the Lord. But again, back to circumstances, right?
He wants them to know who he is.
There you go. Who he is.
He wants Pharaoh to know that. He wants the Israelites to know that.
And he wants Egypt to know that.
And the people of Egypt.
Yes. And interestingly, I think I mentioned to you last week that there was a video I watched where the guy made a reference back to Rahab when they were about to go into the promised land. And Rahab said, I've heard about what God did for you. And it was, isn't her name Rahab? Yeah. And she set the scarlet thread out on the window and to get a picture of the Passover. But she had heard, as far as what would that would be Jordan area. It was on the other side of the Jordan before crossing over into the promised land. And so look how far-reaching the works that God did for Egypt had gone to. It wasn't just in Egypt for the Egyptians and for the Israelites that were there. It was widespreadly known by the time 40 years later came. The people had been talking. It had become within the realm of that world, right, of contact of people. The people, his name had become renowned, had it not?
Where's that verse?
Chapter 3, when he says, I will make this is my name, this is whom you shall tell them that God has sent. And he said, this will be my memorial name forever. Yeah. So that was back in chapter 3. So now in 6, I just want to go through something that I went back and did for myself again. That I see in chapter 1 that the attributes of that name Lord are actually laid out through each of the paragraphs that we looked at. So I went back and looked for the attributes of God that I saw. Now, these are a little bit subjective. This would be what you would call an analytical list, looking back at the chapter and the flow of thought and saying, how am I seeing God presented as the Lord? And how are each of these paragraphs distinctive, maybe, in the way that the Lord is presented? So this is what I did. And you might want to just take this down as notes. I'm not going to write it down. But I saw in verse 1, which was our first paragraph, where the Lord speaks about under compulsion, Pharaoh is going to let Israel go. Why? Because he's going to take them back, right? So I saw this was God being a covenant-keeping God. He is going to sovereignly cause a situation so that his word will be fulfilled for them. And this goes to what you were saying, Susan, about that he's the covenant-keeping God and he's going to keep his covenant. So verse 1, I think, really set the stage on that he is the covenant-keeping God and Pharaoh under compulsion will do this. So that's the first attribute of God. I saw him being presented as the Lord to Israel. Then in 2-9, we see what Carol pointed out about the 3 time references, past, present, and future. And I put that he is presenting himself as the eternal God. Okay? Then in 10-13, we see that the Lord, he charged Israel and Pharaoh to bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt. That was our paragraph title. But I saw in that the sovereignty of God at work, that he gave the charge. He said, this is what you will do. Then in 14-27, we look at this genealogy of Moses and Aaron, right? So what is the attribute of God there? I saw him as the God who is relational. He chose them as his leaders to lead the people of Israel out. He chooses those whom he puts in places of leadership and so forth. But when he does so, it's relational. It's not an arbitrary thing for God to call you, and it's not an arbitrary thing for God to put you in a position of whatever your work is in your spiritual gifting. Okay? He does it as a part of relation building between you and him. Isn't that neat? I want to use you. And this is how I'm going to use you. This is going to suit your personality. This is going to suit your spiritual needs. And it's going to provide for the body of Christ what it needs. Because I place in the body as I so determine, which is what Romans teaches us, right, about the spiritual gifts. Okay, so he's relational. Then the last one is 28-30, where we see he says, I am the Lord, speak to Pharaoh all that I speak to you. And in that I see his authority. Okay, so in totality, how is the Lord going to present himself as the Lord then? On the whole, from where we're standing right here in chapter 6 moving forward, we're entering into now chapter 7 with our Exodus 7 observations today. What I want you to continue to just kind of let it dance around in your head a little bit as a backdrop to all this. He is sovereign. He is the sovereign Lord. He is covenant keeping. He's eternal. He is sovereign. He is relational, and he has authority over his word. He will keep his word. So that kind of leads us in, without going through all the details of what we looked at last week. I think it takes it from a different perspective. And what I saw when I was able to do that is, wow, are there layers? There are so much more possibilities. This is why a pastor can go into any passage in Scripture. He can pull it out, what kind of feels like sometimes out of context, which is not necessarily true. It's he's seeing a specific point or a specific lesson in what's being said there, and he's taking that now and making an application sermon concerning that point. So I could take just one of those points that I just made to you. I could say, well, he's the eternal God, and I could go off on just the eternality of God, right? And that could be a whole sermon, and you're like, well, what does that got to do with Exodus? He took that out of context. No, he didn't. He pulled out a specific point to preach on. So I've been guilty of making that accusation. I don't think he's in context. Now, if it's a wrong interpretation, that would be not good. But this is so cool to see this. Okay, so now we're ready to jump into 7. And I want you to kind of keep in mind for yourself, what are some things that God is pointing you to? Are there rabbit trails that you could spend time on? And I realize just getting the homework done is enough, but are there rabbit trails? And if there are, just make yourself a penciled note somewhere on your observation worksheet or on another piece of paper about something that maybe you would like to go back to later and dig out a little bit deeper. And I'm going to share a couple that I found this week when I was doing this homework here as well. Okay, so now we are ready. Again, let's start with our key words in Exodus 7. So that we can see who our major players are, what our major events are that are going on here.
I did signs, wonders, judgments, and miracles as kind of one.
Okay. Judgments, wonders, miracles. Well, that kind of makes me think about the fact that I went back and looked at those things. Let me just show you. You said judgments, but it could also be,
Signs is another.
Signs. And judgments can also be plagues. Okay, so here's what I want to show you. The miracles is found in 3:20. That word specifically is used. He's still speaking on the same subject matter that he's going to do these, quote, signs. Signs came in 4:8, where he called them signs. Then we see in 4:21 the wonders. And my question all week long was, well, this plagues thing, they keep calling them plagues, but I haven't seen God call them plagues yet. And I was beginning to doubt that they had that right. Well, guess what? I found it. It's in chapter 9. We're not there yet, but in 9:14, he calls them plagues. So we have plagues, wonders, miracles, and signs. And judgments is actually a really good synonym to that. If you would go in and do a word study on it, it would be the word judgment. Did you pull that word judgment right out of the text? Yeah. Okay, tell me where you found that one, because I'd like to put that up here too.
It's in verse 4.
So this is in 7?
7:4.
In 7:4. Very good. Judgments. I'm going to put them together because I think they're pretty much the same. Very cool. We'd already had a homework lesson right there. And it wasn't even planned for. How about that? Okay, good. Excellent. What else?
I saw plagues somewhere, but I went back to another Bible.
Yeah.
Where it is a little
Sometimes you get different translations and it'll...
I guess that's where I saw plagues. In my other,
Yeah. It does come up in this translation. It comes up in chapter 9. So we will get there. Okay. What about peoples? Who are the major players in this particular chapter here? Who are we working with? Come on, you know them.
Moses, Aaron, and Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. Who else? Moses. I'll just put Moses and Aaron together. And then there's one more little group that is real significant.
The wise men and sorcerers.
Yes, sorcerers and magicians.
All those guys.
Etc. Right. Okay. We have in chapter 7, actually we have one plague or sign, but we also have another sign that's not considered a part of those 10, right? That happens first. So what are the signs that we see in chapter 7? So this is the major events. Signs. Yeah, one is the staff to serpents. And the second one is? There you go, water to blood. If you think you're confused right now, wait till we've gone through this over and over with different points, and you start losing track of it. What I did on my observation worksheet was made a special little symbol in my out in the aisle and just made it real bright pink. Just put number 1. And that way, then the next time I'll look for that bright pink and it'll say number 2, and then it will say number 3 to help me get going. But once I did that, then I went, oh yeah, this very first one about the serpents, that's not a sign. That's not his first sign. That one was given for what purpose?
To show his power.
Yeah. And in it, in other words, God said, when you go, I want you to do this to show basically that you have my authority, that I am with you. This is to give you credentialing before Pharaoh and the people who are present in that room when I begin to do these things. When you go to him and say, God is going to do this, they're going to already know that God is with you. Are you kind of catching that? So it starts out with what looks like a sign, but it's a sign for a different purpose. He begins now with, go ahead.
Well, I go back to chapter 4, signs before Moses, that he showed Moses the
Right,
signs.
right.
And that was way back in chapter 4.
Well, there's that too. So God first showed him to Moses, so Moses would know God is with him, right?
Showed him to the people.
And then he was to show them to Israelites first, and then to Pharaoh. And in the doing of that, it was literally a credentialing move. It was God. It's kind of like when God says, and I will put my spirit within you, and then you will go and do these things. As a Christian, what is our credentialing mark? What? They will know you are Christians? By your love. So when God says for you and I that our credentialing is the love that we will have for one another and for him. And in that, then people will recognize that we're from God. Does that kind of make sense to you? So this particular sign, I don't want to call it a sign in the same category as the other 10. There are 10 plagues, we call them, right? The 10. And let me see here. Hold on a second if I can find do I have it in here? I just want to show this to you because I do think that it's important to keep it. Well, here it is. I just think it's important to keep it distinct in your thinking, okay? I know, exactly. So whenever you do charts, they say it's 10, the 10 plagues or the 10 signs given to Israel or given to Egypt that he would let them go so that they can go and worship. That first one was a credentialing marker. It was to say, God is with this man, so the things that he speaks, he is speaking from me.
Doesn't that make sense? Because the serpent, throwing your staff down and make it a serpent is not exactly a plague. It didn't do anything.
No,
It's just, look
it
what
just-
I can do.
it was
As
just
opposed
a
to,
sow-
You can't be drinking any more water.
That's right. It was a sign of power and authority that can only come from God. Although what we did see was Pharaoh tried to debunk it or refute it, right? Or challenge it in some form. But I just think that was kind of an interesting point to bring up. I thought, well, that's interesting.
What I loved is what Laura said is that in people and say, tell them this is what I said. He first says it to us privately so that we internalize it, so that we know who he is and his power before he sends us out. And I love that.
Yeah. Okay.
Didn't the magicians, didn't they go back and do that too?
Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. So it's like he's already trying to refute the authority. At this point then forward, then Moses goes to him and says, okay, this is what I'm going to show you that God is going to do. And now, because I'm going to speak it, and when it happens, you will know it was God, right? The first one is to say, I am from God, and I have that kind of authority and power. And so when I speak it and it happens, you know it's still God. So the first one is a credentialing point, the staff to serpents. And then the next one is going to be water to blood. Okay, so this is just our words, our key words list. But yet, we're getting some really good stuff out of this already, aren't we? Okay, now what else do we have for key words in here? Staff and serpents. Okay, perfect. Okay. Waters. Water to blood.
And then there's repeated, and I don't know if this is really called keywords, but there's repeated phrases.
Yeah, there are all those. This one is hard to not end up with a really messy observation worksheet. Aren't you glad that Kay gives us observation worksheets to really mess up, so in our books we don't do that? And Kristen sent out to us a list of possible choices for how to mark things. And I find it hard for me to use someone else's thinking. I start to do it, but that's their thinking, right? And then it doesn't work for me, and I end up changing it, and then I'm like, oh man, I didn't mark it the same. So I've decided I'm not going to look at that chart anymore. I'm just doing it my way. But it is really hard to find a way to mark all the things that are actually necessary. They are so repeated, because one of the things that I also noted in here as I think a need to be marked is that the magicians did the same. And then in 22, the magicians did the same, right? It's only going to be a couple of times, because then it's going to drop off, right? They're going to stop being able to do it, right? We see it in chapter 8 and verse 7. The magicians did the same with their secret arts. But then after that, it says, but they could not, right? In verse 18. But I did mark all of those 4 places with a special highlighting so that I would see the flow of what was going on, and where there was a delineation of they were trying to replicate and then they couldn't. Okay.
At least God got the last word, because Aaron's staff swallowed up their staff.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, just in case you didn't notice that. Exactly. Yeah.
It may be in 9 and 10, because on day 2 it said do 9 and 10, so I went into 9 and 10.
Yeah, no, I know. And this was my mistake, Carol, because when I gave you the days to cut off, I verbally said to the class, just do chapters 7 and 8. But then I realized when I went in and did my homework, starting in day 2, they're wanting you to do, and we should have cut off day 1, as far as the way I was breaking it. So I'm sorry.
The servants then come to the point where they say, this is of God, give up and let them go. But that's probably in 9 and 10.
Yeah, don't get too far. But you're right. And if you did 9 and... So you did all of your observation on all 4 chapters? Oh, gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry. I did say to you in class, just do 2 chapters, the next 2 chapters. But I'm sorry. And you guys are going to have to pay really close attention to me saying things like that, because I broke these. And as I said to you all early in this, I have never done Exodus before. So that I don't have a lot of experience with the curriculum. And we talked last week about the fact that the way this curriculum is written is confusing because she overlaps herself too. She has you go a little bit into one and then she pulls you back, and then you're like, okay, I'm confused. Was I supposed to do that chapter observation or am I not? It's just a really confusing because of the way the message winds and twists and overlaps. So just keep that in mind. Speaking of that, then while we were at this, next week, I'm going to tell you what you're doing so that you know. Again. Okay, so we are going to, we're in 3A, we're going to be doing 3B. Exodus 9 and 10. Okay?
And the verses that we're doing.
Okay. And then you'll do days 3, 4, and 5, which you all didn't do, but you did your observations already. So basically, you're going to have the whole time just to work on your analytical observations of Pharaoh and so forth, which will be really good for you, Carol. I see you already saying, I hate doing that. I know, but it'll be a good chance because now that you did go ahead and do the homework part. I felt it drop. I'm going to have a black hand now the rest of the day.
Katie, she had us do a list of the signs and,
Of all of them.
yeah,
Of all the signs. Yeah.
well, I went through 5, what we've gone through. But I did the first signs, 1A and 1B, the ones that Moses did. God showed Moses and then to his people. And then I started over with the first sign that you have up there, the staff. You're even saying want the blood to.
This is the first sign. Yeah. This is the first. This sign was for credentialing Moses as God's prophet.
But it is a sign.
Well, it has, yes, it is a sign, but it is not.
A plague.
It is not the plague against Egypt to make them let Israel go. It was for him to go before Pharaoh and credential himself that he is speaking from God, so that he would have that authority and there would be a recognition by Pharaoh that something's going on with him. Although Pharaoh's slow, right? Because even later, his magicians say, look, you have, this is the finger of God. You have to acknowledge that. And he won't even be there until he gets through all 10. But the point to the first one is to credential. This is the first sign, technically. Sign for Egypt to let Israel go. Okay? Have you got that corrected in your head now? They're both signs, but for different purposes. The first purpose is to credential. After that, the 10 signs are to make them let Israel go.
So there's really 9 plagues.
There's 10. Is Passover. We're not there yet. It's on that sheet I just pulled out and showed you.
And starting at the blood, there's 10. The blood, and then
The blood all the way through will be 10. Here, let me show you. Here you go. Take a look. Take a look at this here. This will
good.
help
Thank
you.
you.
You're welcome.
You're right.
There's 10. I know there's 10. Somebody told me that once, that there's 10. The 10 plagues. No, it's not. So, and it does make sense. And I think, well, maybe it's a really good thing that I brought it up because I can see where you look at that first one, you go, well, that's a sign, but it's not a sign for the purpose of having Pharaoh let Israel go. And the reason why this is, I think, important is to understand that this is doctrine about the subject matter of redemption. So it's a doctrinal teaching about redemption, and these 10 plagues are going to show God both refuting their gods, the gods of Egypt, but also showing us this process of coming out. When you do your analytical on Pharaoh this week, I want you to pay close attention to make a thorough list on Pharaoh as far as specifically what he does, and then go to the right column on your observation and say, what does this show me about Pharaoh? What do I see Pharaoh doing here? okay? Because one of the things we didn't put up here yet for a key word is about his heart. The hard heart, right? That one is going to be, I think, really significant. And the hard heart is going to reveal from there, it's going to reveal to you the compromises that Pharaoh is wanting to impose upon Israel as he is being encountered by these plagues. And if you haven't come across anything in your listening online to different sermons or whatever yet, I would recommend you go in and even just Google that, Pharaoh's compromise. His compromises. He's presenting or he's suggesting compromises, and we're going to look at those in a little bit this morning.
This first one, where you're calling it the credential, Pharaoh's heart was hardened on that one.
So what does that tell you about Pharaoh? Okay, just because his heart was hardened, when did his heart get hardened? At what point did Pharaoh's heart get hardened?
When the serpents
Even before that.
yeah, he
He
was already.
was already hardened.
He already thinks he is God.
He is already thinking he is God. Good point, Kristen.
That's so.
And what God is saying to us when he says, I think, let's see, let me go back and see. Way back in chapter 4 somewhere, he said, and his heart will be hardened and it will be under compulsion that he will let them go. Back in chapter 4, but I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you will say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. Hey, P.S. and by the way, this goes back to Genesis 6. Is Israel ever called the sons of God? There you go. Here's another verse. I never saw this one before until this. I went, oh my gosh, that's even clearer than all the others. It doesn't use the exact word, the sons of God. He says, he is my son. He is my firstborn. And I'm curious a little bit more more about that. But I'm wondering, even if before he talks about, let me see if I can find another place in here where it talks about Pharaoh's heart.
It talks about it right there in the beginning of 7 where he says, but I'm going to harden it for this purpose.
Yes,
So it's just going to
right.
because
So,
you all need to see what I.
yes. So what you all need to pay attention to is, on the one hand, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. And why is it hardened? He's refusing to do certain things, right? On the other hand, God will harden his heart. So it's both. Pharaoh was hard, and then God will use him to further harden him. Are you following what I'm saying here a little bit? I'm going to talk about it when we get there. Let's move on to get through this here. Okay, keywords. There's quite a bit, actually. You could cover a lot more than just that. There's those multiplicities of phrases in 7, that they shall know that I am the Lord.
So Moses and Aaron did it.
Yes,
I liked that one.
yes, and they did it. I love that.
They just did it. I'm like, that's application in here.
Yeah. So when he speaks in here in verse 7, or verse 5 rather, it says, the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when? When I stretch out my hand on Egypt. Now there's again, stretching out my hand. Does that allude to anything else in here that you're going to see later about the finger of God? Again, the idea of this outstretched arm, the hand of God, the finger of God. There's this pictorial imagery that's used in that kind of imagery.
But the hand is also used for the staff.
Yes, absolutely. And in doing that, Moses and Aaron both are used as God's hands, the hands and feet of God. And when they stretch out the staff, it's as God is stretching out the staff. It's as if God himself is doing it because they are his vessel through whom he is working. He's already credentialed them. They are my servants and my spokesmen. They're my prophets, right? Or Moses particularly. Moses is his prophet. And he says, and you will be as God to them. So in that manner, he stretches out the staff. It's him being God to them. Okay? All right. Now, let's title this particular one before we get started. because you've already done all your work on this, what is the major emphasis in the flow of thought? So let's go back to chapter 6 again, because in the flow, you want it to be distinctive. In chapter 6, he says, as Lord, God Almighty is making himself known. Okay? Now, what is it that, what and who is going to know what about the Lord in chapter 7? Who and what?
The Egyptians are gonna know.
Yes. So now in the flow of thought, I'm going to make myself known, and now he's going to say the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Isn't that interesting? The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. Okay, so there's our theme. And you could go on in that title if you wanted to, when I stretch out my hand, right? But we'll just add that in as subnotes to things as we're going on here. So starting verse 1 to 7 is our first paragraph. We need a nice observation on what we're looking at there. I found this part really interesting because it seems like 1 through 7, that's where we're picking up our theme for the chapter on the whole. So we don't want to pick up on that particular verse in 5 as a paragraph title. We want to focus on something else in there that in general shows us how God is going to make the Egyptians know that he is the Lord. And what do you see in there that God is going to do? Yeah, he is. He's going to, and he literally says it. What are some of the phrases in here? What are some of the verses that you might have picked out?
Multiply my signs and my wonders.
Yeah, and what verse is that?
3.
Okay, so that I may multiply my sons and my wonders in the land. Pharaoh will harden his heart, that I may multiply my signs and wonders. So that's a really interesting thought, because right now we still don't have a full grip on in our conversations about this idea of God's hardening his heart or Pharaoh having a hard heart. So I want you to set that aside, because what happens is these two things can become conflated, because it's about the idea of free will and God's sovereignty of his will over our will, right? It's a two-sided coin, and you cannot divorce one from the other, and God never violates. So remember, God never violates himself. Does God desire that all men be saved? Yes. Does God provide opportunity for all men to be saved? Yes. Could Pharaoh have been saved through this process? Yes. All he had to have done is bow his knee and pull back, right? At some point, the Egyptians, the magicians are going to pull back and say, whoa, this is something beyond even our abilities. And they're beginning to recognize what? That God is the Lord, right? And so interesting that as we move through these next 3 chapters, or 4 chapters, we are going to be seeing this unfolding work of God that we're seeing here displayed. So he says, the Lord said to Moses, see, I make you as God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet, and you shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh that he let the sons of Israel go out of his land. But I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Why? That I may multiply my signs and my wonders in the land of Egypt. Why must he multiply the signs and wonders? So that Egypt will come to know that God is the Lord, that the God of Israel is the Lord. Because right now they've got what going on in their country? Idol worship, multitudes of idols. And we haven't even begun to touch on any of that. When Pharaoh does not listen, did you catch that? When he does not listen. So what is that telling you about God? God has foreknowledge. Does foreknowledge mean that God forces Pharaoh to not listen? No. Who makes the decision to not listen? Pharaoh does. Because if God desires all men come to salvation, would God force you not to hear him and not to receive it and not to accept it? No. So what you're seeing here then is 2 things are true at the same time. Pharaoh is already hardened in his heart, and God will harden his heart. So God is going to end up using him as a tool, as a vessel, because he fits the needed mark. God rose, we see there's the same way. Cyrus did not know the Lord, and yet God rose up Cyrus to do what? Conquer Babylon, let Israel go from their Babylonian captivity to go back to their land and rebuild their temple. Why? Because God still had an unfolding plan of redemption that was going to take place in Jerusalem when his son would be crucified there. So he had to make these things unfold. But Cyrus did not know the Lord, according to Isaiah. He was not the Lord's follower or worshiper. Yet he did give permission and allowed them to go back. So we're seeing that here. We're seeing both things happening at one time. Free will of man working with the sovereign hand of God over it. Are you following? Okay. So when Pharaoh does not listen to you, then I may lay my hand on Egypt and bring about my hosts, my people, the sons of Israel from the land of Egypt, by great judgments. There's that word judgments that you brought out. The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand on Egypt and bring out the sons of Israel from their midst. So Moses and Aaron did it, as the Lord commanded. Thus they did. Moses was 80 years old, Aaron was 83, and then they spoke to Pharaoh. So what do you see when you see that the totality of everything is being said there in verses 1 through 7? In literary writings, have we ever seen other places where we see God kind of give the big picture and then details?
Yes.
Big picture,
Yes, Revelation.
details. So what do you see in verses 1 through 7? This seems to me like a big picture view of what? The next 4 chapters, right? Or the next, all the plagues that are going to follow. So I look at this as a overview for what's to follow in this 1 to 7. It's an introductory. And he's telling us by introduction, what is he going to do with Pharaoh? I will harden his heart. Why? Yeah, I may multiply my signs. Isn't that amazing? That's a pretty good overview if you think about it, of exactly what's coming up ahead. Now we can go back in here and just make a few points on this. One of the things we know here is that the Lord knew. What did he know? That Pharaoh would not listen. Knowing that he wouldn't listen does not mean God forced him to not listen. It just means that he knew he would not listen. I want to take you to a verse in 2 Timothy 2:20, just very quickly. And you tell me if you think you see a parallel in this. Somebody want to look that verse up?
What is it?
2 Timothy 2:20. And I wish we had time to go all the way through Romans 9, 10, and 11 on the sovereignty of God, but this will help you a little bit maybe.
Now, in a large house, there are not only gold and silver vessels, but also vessels of wood and earthenware, and some for honor and some for dishonor.
Okay, so in God's house, in God's creation, there are all kinds of vessels, right? So he calls one earthen and one gold. Some for honor, some for dishonor. Not that he created them to dishonor them, but they will be dishonored because of their choices, right? Rejection of God will result in their dishonor. The ones who are the gold for honor will be vessels chosen for honor. So who are our 2 vessels that have been displayed to us here so far? Pharaoh as dishonored and Moses and Aaron as honored. Vessels for God's use for honor, God's dishonor. Or God to use because they're dishonored, he will use them in that manner. So that's what we see. The Lord knew that Pharaoh would not listen. He's a vessel for dishonor, I think, is what you can see in that. That's in 2 Timothy 2:20. that was just a cross-reference that came to my mind from many, many years ago when I taught 2 Timothy. Okay, and he's going to do what in verse 4? What does he say he wants to do there? There's a then statement. When Pharaoh does not listen to you, what? Yeah. So he would not listen, and he said when he does not listen, then I'll put a clock on that. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt. Kind of makes me think again about the subject matter of suffering that we looked at when we did Mark, and I can't remember, there was another place, but Peter. When you think about the fact that sometimes God allows us, and sometimes God even inflicts upon us suffering, right? Earlier in this book, did we not see a place where he speaks about that? Who is it that makes your mouth? Who makes the deaf and who makes the mute? Is it not I, says the Lord? So God can sometimes even cause hardships to come into our lives. We have a resistance to that in our thinking because we are very spoiled and we think that God should only be a God that works in the manner that we think is best. So we think if he's hurting us in that he's causing us heartache or sorrows, or hardships, or suffering, or persecution, or deafness, or blindness, or bad health, or all these things, that's not in line with what we think God is. We think he's all about love and goodness and giving us blessing, right? Why do you think we're in that mindset? Why do you think America in particular is in that mindset? We are so entitled. Now, there's a subject matter people should talk about, entitled. Who's entitled? Who's entitled that God should not bring upon you? What if the only way you will be brought to him for salvation of your soul is through hardship? Do you remember what Jesus said to Peter? He said about his going to the cross, and he said, Satan, get behind me. He said, what value will it be to you to gain the world and forfeit your soul? Jesus, it was necessary for suffering on his part so that there would be salvation made available to everyone. The apostles at the time that Jesus was walking on the earth during that Acts chapter 8 conversation, they were looking for the Christ to come to be their king. And when Jesus said, no, I must go to the cross, and Peter had this argument with him, and God said, get behind me, Satan, it was because he was saying, I see the greater need. So here we're seeing, I think, something similar in that manner. We're seeing that God knew Pharaoh's heart. He chose him throughout history. In history, he chose him and placed, God determines the exact time when you're born. God chose the exact time when this heart would be born, because why? He knows the end from the beginning. He knew what kind of a man he would be. He allowed him to be exalted to a position. Can you see that? This goes far beyond what we actually reason things through sometimes. We don't go to the think, well, you know what, God, what did Esther say? But for a time such as this, perhaps for this moment in history, I was born at this time in history. Maybe God designated my time in history right now just for this. Gee, that's a novel idea. You mean God can take people even before they're born, and he already knows what they will be like when they're born, and he can place them exactly in time in history so that he will accomplish his will? And what is God's ultimate will? What does God want for us and for humanity? What did he want when he created us in the Garden of Eden? That we would be eternally in relationship with him and in fellowship with him. So what if it's necessary for God to pull a man like Pharaoh and put him in time and place in history, knowing the heart that he had, so that he could use that willful, disobedient, dishonoring heart in order that he could do signs to maybe reach some whose hearts will be turned? pretty amazing, right? So when he does not listen, God says, then I will lay my hand on Egypt. Why? Because I want Egypt to know that I am the Lord. That's the title. They are going to know that I am the Lord. I will harden Pharaoh's heart. Be sure you're marking that as you're doing your observations. You're going to see it come up over and over again in 9 and so go back is 7 also and 8 and mark those if you have it. A distinction that's going to be made. I want you to pay attention to this, where it's going to begin to say his heart was, as God is performing these specific signs, starting with the water and blood, it'll say, and his heart was hardened, and his heart was hardened, and his heart was hardened, as the Lord had said it would be. And then it's going to say, and then it says the Lord hardened. And I want you to notice at what point in the unfolding signs that God is giving through these 10 plagues, when does God start doing the hardening? Where before he was already hard. Now he's just going to use them. Okay, you're hard, I'm going to use it. You're going to be my vessel to proclaim to the world, to my people Israel, to Egypt, and to the whole world that I am the Lord. I am the only true God, and all those other gods you guys are worshiping are nothing. And I'm going to prove that to you. I only have 1 hour. I'm only on paragraph 1. This tells you. Okay, but I'm trying. I don't know how much more I'll get through on this today, but I feel like these are foundational pieces to grabbing hold of your understanding of what you're looking at here. So often we don't spend enough time really figuring out what is going on here, and we spend the whole time, we can mechanically go through and title paragraphs, but are you catching what God is doing here? And what doctrinal truths are being revealed to you about who your God is and how he operates. The fact that he's sovereign does not mean he makes you sin. The fact that he knows what you're going to do does not mean that when he chooses you and hardens you that he did that to you. You did that to yourself already. If your heart is hardened. Later, you're going to see a situation where he's going to talk about, when do you want this done? Oh, tomorrow. Oh, just put it off till tomorrow. Yes. Not just lost his mind, but is that not, what does the Hebrews say about it when they did not couple faith with works? And he says, if the Lord is presented to you today as your, how is it phrased there? Entering the rest of the Lord. He said, do not put it off until tomorrow. At least today is the day. Today is your day to say yes to the Lord. Pharaoh didn't do that. He says tomorrow. And you're going to see that later, that God starts using that word tomorrow. So make yourself a note. That word tomorrow, you might want to mark that, because it's another indicator of the heart of Pharaoh. When you're doing your analytical list on him this week, you want to think about what is Pharaoh doing here when he responds to God in the way that he responds. What am I learning about myself and about my relationship with God, and on the whole about people in general, how they respond to God and how they should respond and how they shouldn't respond. So I want you to keep that in mind. Pharaoh was chosen by God because he was a vessel fitted for this very purpose. Okay, it was a hard heart that will bring Egypt and Israel to believe the Lord. Okay, so that's 1 through 7. How am I going to get all this on here? Let's do this. 8 to 13 is our next paragraph. Okay, we're past that big one at the beginning there. I spent so much time on in 1 through 7 because it's like the overview. It sets the stage for what's going to happen in these next chapters. So now we have simply a actual sign, right? We have the first sign. So I'm going to put up here first sign. Okay, now what are we seeing is happening? How are we going to title this? Oh, not first sign, sorry. This is God credentials Moses and Aaron. Sorry, I jumped ahead in my thinking. How does God go about credentialing them? That's not the title I'm going to give this title. This is just my understanding of what's going on here, because it's not a sign, it's something else. It is going to be a sign, but it's a sign that's not one of the 10 plagues. Okay? All right, what is this sign? What happens? How did you title 8 through 13?
God tells Moses and Aaron to work a miracle with the staff, turning it into a serpent.
Very good. That's very lengthy, though. Let's shorten that down. Let's just say what actually happened.
Aaron's staff became a serpent.
There we go. Aaron's staff became a serpent. Okay, so there's our title for the paragraph. Why is that so? What prompted this to happen? And how does this show us a little bit about the heart of Pharaoh? What do you see in verse 9? How did this miracle actually come on the plate? Even though we know God has already prepared Moses and Aaron to do this, right? And they've already done it before their own people in order to convince their own people that God was sending them.
It starts out like Pharaoh basically tells them, well, show me what you got.
Yeah, show me. You've been
I
sent
listen
by
to you.
somebody. Show me your goods. Show me what you can do. Show me why I should even bother listening to you. It was not a positive. It wasn't, oh, wow, show me. No, it was, yeah, right, show me. And why do I know that it was a negative kind of a statement of just show me what you can do kind of a thing? It's because of the result of it at the end. What is the end result in verse 13?
His heart's hardened and he doesn't listen.
His heart was hardened. He already had a hardened heart, and he did not listen to them. It was his choice. He did not listen to them. And guess what? That's just like the Lord had said. Why? Because God is sovereign, and he knows the end from the beginning. Okay, so the Lord, in this case here, we see, what did the Lord know? Yeah, he knew that yes, his heart will be hardened, and I want to put that on here. But the first thing he knew was that what was going to happen with Pharaoh. Yeah. I lost my spelling there. Okay, Pharaoh will demand a miracle. He needs to see that this guy is somebody he wants to bother with. Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he told Moses ahead of time that it was going to be hard. So this Lord is omniscient. He knew. The Lord knew that Pharaoh would demand. And what else do we see in here? As far as the players are concerned in this idea of the staff, he's going to demand the sign, and then what do we see them do?
Then he's going to show, well, I can do that too.
Yes. Okay, so then there's going to be a response. Pharaoh's magicians, let's see, did the same. You want to close that door back there? Did the same with their secret arts, right? Tell me what we know about that. Yeah. So it's with the secret arts. So by definition, let's look at the definition on that one. The secret arts by definition, it's number 3858. And my definition sheet is like this long on this. But basically, it is exactly what you just said, Susan. It's demonic spiritual powers. Let me give you a couple of verses I found on this. 1 Timothy, it's 4:1 and 2. And there's another one in Matthew 12 that's pretty good too, that kind of shows you the idea of spiritual powers that are demonic. The possessing of, this is where we see the demon possession as a picture. And somebody look it up, 1 Timothy 4, 1 and 2.
But the Spirit explicitly says that in the latter times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and the doctrines of demons by means of the hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own conscience as with a branding.
Okay, you really do need to put that as a cross-reference in there, because when you're looking at the secret arts, this is what this is talking about. And by the way, Susan, in that verse, when are those kinds of demonic spirits going to take place? In the latter times. This is talking about the end of the age. So what I found interesting as I pondered on this was it seems like in history there was a time, particularly when Jesus was on the earth, that there was a lot of demonic stuff going on. Prior to this, what we see is here in Exodus, there was a lot of demonic stuff going on also with Israel in those early years when they were in Egypt, and even when they went into their own land, they took a lot of those demonics with them. And then there was a cleansing of the land at one point through the time. But then when Jesus came, demonics rose back up again. Then the church was birthed, and what is the church called? The restrainer. So we restrain evil forces. We restrain the work and the power of them. They're not gone, but they are restrained. But that verse tells us what's going to happen. In the end times, those spiritual forces of darkness are going to come back again in full measure. Why do you think that is? What's removed? The restrainer is removed. So interesting picture in this. So what we're seeing here are these demonic spiritual powers that are going to be very similar to in the days at the end of the age that God has already told us is coming. The reason we're not seeing them now, other places in the world it's much stronger. You're going to see that because where God's light is not so much present and there's not an overwhelming amount of light, you have less restraining work going on in those nations, and therefore you see demonic forces heavily at work. In America, you are blessed if you're living here, and in many of the other nations that have the Lord still present in their culture on the whole. But just know this, that these demonic forces, these spiritual powers of darkness, what these men are doing are not tricks. They have a power source behind them. But what's really interesting is, what do we see is the counterpart to that demonic force? These wise men, sorcerers and magicians, they did the same, how with their secret arts. But what gave them the ability to do what they did? To take their staff, throw it down, and have it turned into a serpent? Satan. Demonic powers. So are they real? Yeah. It wasn't just a trick. It was actual demonic powers and forces. When we did Revelation, we saw that in the end I think it's in chapter 6 of Revelation, where it talks about these frogs that come out and they have these spiritual powers that are going to be taking place. Same kind of thing. We're going to see that as we move on in these signs. So, but the contrast to that is, for each one of them threw down his staff, and they turned into serpents. But yeah, so I'm going to put on here, but I love those buts. But Aaron's staff. Now, did you notice what it says? Swallowed up what? What swallowed what?
Aaron's staff swallowed up theirs.
Yeah, his staff swallowed their staff. It doesn't say his serpent swallowed their serpent. That's in my mind because that's how I see it, right? But no, it's actually Aaron's. Aaron's staff swallowed their staff. And 12. Okay, so that's your contrast. It's the secret arts against God's servants. Right? It's against God himself. The secret arts versus God. And who wins? God. Right from the beginning. So this is the one right here now. This is the one that establishes God is credentialing Moses and Aaron before these men. He's already credentialed that. But what's interesting, it doesn't really tell us what the feelings were or what the thoughts were by the magicians at that point. But we do know what Pharaoh's response is. What does Pharaoh do?
Hardens his heart.
He does not listen.
Okay, and that's in verse 13. Sorry.
So it says in 2 Timothy 3:8 that the magicians are James and Jambres.
Yeah. Huh.
And what I think is interesting is Pharaoh hardened his heart, but these magicians in chapter 9 or so, they're the ones that say this is the finger of God.
Mhm.
So their hearts weren't hardened. They recognized there's something here.
Yeah.
powerful in us.
And what's very interesting about that picture, too, is if you play that out further in your thinking, it's like, okay, so why didn't they at that point walk away? Why didn't they say, I'm done with this? I'm not going against God. It just means they recognized it, but what is that? What were they not doing?
Submitting.
Not submitting, not bowing their knee. They were still working for the devil.
At least
Right.
they had some clear thinking.
They did have a clarity of it.
Yeah.
So that also tells us something else. What does that also tell us about people in their relationship with God?
The more you reject him, the more you lose your mind.
Yes, that's true. Oh, that's a good point. The more you reject God, the more you lose your mind. Romans 1, their minds are turned over to a deluded mind, right? That they will accept lies as truth, and they will worship the creation rather than the Creator.
Conscience is seared. They have no.
Conscience is seared. That's another way of saying. See, can you see how spiritually there are so many depths and layers to what's being presented to us here? And this is why I'm saying when you do this topical study or analytical study on Pharaoh this next week, you could go so many ways that you can't even begin. Think of the doctrines. You can look at this from just purely the spiritual truths concerning salvation itself, and how do people either go into salvation or walk away from salvation. Does just knowing about God accomplish what God wants in you? The answer to that is no. We see the magicians continue on, and yet they know, even at this point, they're aware of it. They're not saying it, but we're going to get to a place where we're going to see this is the finger of God. They recognize it. But yet, they keep on. So interesting. Okay. So that's a good thing to, I think, to kind of bring to the surface in how you're looking at. This is all about God trying to teach all of us, for that matter, humanity, that he is the Lord. And how does he go about doing that? Well, sometimes it takes pain and suffering to get you there. Sometimes it takes all these supernatural signs, and yet some people dig in their heels and other people bow their knee. Why is that? Why is it that someone like Pharaoh has such a hard heart, and then God says, okay, I'll harden you more? Well, read Romans 9, 10, and 11. He's sovereign over his plan of salvation, and he'll use whomever he wants. Or go back to this verse that I took you to in 2 Timothy. If you're a vessel that God created, does he not have the right to use you? If you're going to reject him, does he not have the right to use you to accomplish salvation for others? He did it with Cyrus. He's going to do it with Pharaoh. He has that right. Not only does he have that right, but wow, how much does he love us? That he'll even use a resistant, rebellious, non-bending of the knee person and use that person to bring you into salvation. Because you either watch their life and go, wow, right? And that helps bring you around. Okay, because we're going to see that's actually what's going to happen here. Okay, so that's 8 through 13. We have one more paragraph, 14 to 25.
You went all the way to 25?
I did. And because it's all about water to blood. That's how I made the decision. The whole thing is still about that last, I'm doing it by the plagues. Now, I don't necessarily always do that. Oh, man, that's my doctor. Sorry, I can't do it, not right now. Okay. I've been waiting all week for this guy to call. Now he calls, of course. Of course. All right, so 14 to 25 is about what sign? This is our first sign.
Turning the Nile into the water into blood.
Yeah, first sign. There's our sign. I actually do it this way on my paper, like a stop sign. Yeah, that's my first sign. Okay, and it's you're going to title it. I'm just going to put the Lord turns water to blood. And does he say why he does that in here? Do you see a verse in here where he says what his goal is? Go to verse 7. There you go. By this you shall know that I am the Lord. By this sign, in other words. By this sign, it's one of the many I'm going to have to do, but by this sign you will know I am the Lord. And that was in 17, I think, right?
And this is just Kristen's brain, not that I
Okay.
know anything, but I've always looked at this first sign as kind of a throwback to how this all got started by throwing babies into the Nile.
Yeah,
That made the Nile run
with
red
blood.
with their blood.
That's a good picture.
I had thought about the blood and the water.
Because you're throwing all the babies in there and, you know, you're gonna,
Right, but technically they die and therefore blood's shed. Well, we did talk about that. We talked about it earlier when we talked about the blood coming onto the shore, and that picture is death. And that's the whole point to it, is what was the Nile in the Egyptian belief system? The source of life, right? It was their god of life. And in that, therefore, God says, let me show you what your life is. And he takes their water of life, throws it on the dry ground, and it becomes a picture of death. It's actually death. Okay. Moses said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. He refuses. Did you catch that? It's he that's doing it. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning, and as he is going out to the water, and station yourself to meet him on the bank, and you shall take your staff in your hand and turn it into a serpent. Your hand that was turned into a serpent, and you shall say to him. So really interesting here is how he says, I want you to use the same symbol to continue to keep his mind registered that this is me and that I am doing this. And when you take that same staff and you use that to perform this sign with, it's going to connect his thinking with me, the Lord. Okay? And he says, and you shall say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, sent me to you, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But behold, you have not listened until now. So he gave them, this was basically like a shot across the bow. This was like the warning. He's credentialing Moses, and he does this right here. He's credentialing Moses here by, no, that's not it, it's here. This is the staff right here. I'm sorry, I've got to get this up here, my staff. I need my picture so that I can keep it straight. He does this very first sign to say to him, this is what I want you to do, but then he didn't do it. So now I'm going to start inflicting my judgments. So now we come into the judgments part. Before it was simply a warning shot, now it's my judgments, okay?
Isn't there a lot of significance to that word, behold?
Well, behold, yes. Behold particularly in Hebrew language, anytime you see that word behold, it means pay attention. I'm about to say something very, very important, and you need to pay attention.
I looked that word up and it didn't give the emphasis on it like I had heard before.
Yes. Well, if you go into you have to go into deeper word studies possibly. I'll look it up this week if I can remember to do that. Take a look and see what I come up with for you. Okay. And he says, you've not listened until now, and thus says the Lord, by this you shall know that I am the Lord. So in other words, now these signs I'm going to do of the next 10 plagues, these are going to be shown to you and given to you and performed before your eyes and in your midst, so that you will know that I am the Lord. That's the point to all of these signs. So he takes the Nile, and he takes that staff, and it will be turned to blood. So the first thing I want you to notice here is that God gives them a warning in this. He's telling them before he does anything that he's going to do this, right? By the way, did anybody make what we call a simple list within the text in verse 19? What kind of waters are affected?
All the fresh water.
They're rivers, they're streams, they're pools, they're reservoirs.
And then all the things that
And there will also be blood throughout the land, both in vessels of wood and vessels of stone. Now, it would be one thing to touch the water and just let the water turn to blood.
But your cup of
At the same time, your vessel, your pitcher of water at home is now turned to blood.
you're back home. Yeah.
And it's the water that comes from the Nile. And you're going to make that connection because you're going to know where you filled your water pitcher from.
So
Wow.
they're digging around the Nile.
Mm-hmm.
Are they getting fresh water there then?
Yeah, they're digging down deep enough to get a spring of water from beneath. So that was another thing I thought about too. What does it tell you about the water in the Nile? It was affected, but what about the streams that feed the Nile? They're not. Therefore, what's going to be able to happen after? Reparative. As the water is filtered in with the fresh water from below, as it's fed with the fresh streams. The streams leading into the Nile that are beneath this are not, because they were able to dig around, it says, on the edges and dig deep enough to find water from its original source.
The other question I have.
Very cool.
I watched a movie about the Egypt and everything. All these people were in Goshen, the Israelites. So their water, they didn't have the blood in
Well,
their water?
it
They
if-
didn't get affected by all these?
I think that in the beginning, Israel was affected. They received a lot of these first signs. You're going to see a place where he uses that word distinction, and he's going to set them apart and make a distinction of them. But in the beginning, he allows them to feel the effect of these signs. Why do you think he would need to do that?
He needs to prove who he is to them.
To them as well. He's getting Israel's attention also. This is God at work, and this is what God is doing, and Egypt is feeling this. All of Egypt is feeling this, and I want you to see that this is me. So God allows them to also have that. But apparently they would have other, just like the Egyptians did, they would dig down and they would find other sources of water. So it wasn't like they had no water to drink for 7 days. We know that would be really, really bad. But any water that came out of the Nile became blood. Whether it was in the Nile or in the streams off the Nile or in the pitchers that drew the water out of the Nile, all that came to blood. But beneath the surface of the earth, God left fresh water, and they could dig for it. That would be a lot of work, but they could do that. I don't exactly know how that works itself out, but
Yeah, but they dug wells way back.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This movie I was watching said these people in Goshen were just fine the whole time.
Right. Don't you remember when you went through here that there's a place in here where they use that word distinction? Here it is. It starts with the flies. So we also have another one about gnats that's going to happen. So, okay.
The god of Nile, it said, when I looked that up about Osiris, that was the god of the Nile. The Nile was his bloodstream.
Wow, very interesting. So there's two things going on here. One of their gods says that the Nile was his bloodstream of one of their gods. And of another god, it says the Nile is is the source of life. Because it gave life to them, they would flood the lands, and that's how their crops would grow. They had to have this flooding every season at the right time of year, which who creates the seasons and even the floodings? God does. Why? To bless people, humanity, so that the crops would grow. But they weren't giving God credit for that. They were giving credit to these false gods. And so God says, okay, I'm going to take that blood, that water that you consider your God, and you consider the source of life, and I'm going to show you its death to you. That's you're worshiping the creation rather than the creator.
Well, and blood was life
And it was life.
to the Hebrews.
Yes, yes. Well, and we know that when we get into Leviticus, we're going to even see that more. Yeah. So the symbolisms in here are very interesting, and it does take you some time. And I like that particular one about it was one of the gods that was his actually bloodstream. That's interesting.
Yeah, there were apparently 3 gods that were connected with the Nile.
Okay, and so now, by this you will know that I am the Lord. And then what do we see as the response of Pharaoh's?
They did the same with their secret
Yeah.
gods.
I didn't really understand that because God had already done it. So how are they gonna do it again? It's already done.
I don't. It's just saying that they are duplicating it in some way. Maybe they had an area where they had some kind of water that hadn't been tainted, and they did it. But it's crazy, even in the fact that they thought that would be a good idea, because they're going against their own gods.
I know, it's weird.
I know. But what did they do in doing that? The fact that they had enough power through their magic arts, their demonic spiritual powers, that their powers allowed them to touch water and turn it to blood and mimic God's sign. What is in the thinking of the demonic powers in doing that? Why would they want to do that?
To keep people with them.
Yeah.
Satan
Your
doesn't want
God's
God to win.
your God's no bigger. Yeah, you're not going to win. No, we can do that. He can do that. We can do that, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's what we see as the Lord. But Moses and Aaron did even as the Lord had commanded. They lifted up their staff. They struck it in the sight of his servants, and all the water of the Nile was turned to blood. But the magicians of Egypt did the same with their secret arts. That's in 22. And then Pharaoh turned. Now this is interesting. If you want to see where this is not God forcing anything, what's going on in verse 23?
It just turns around and says, I'm not concerned about this. Goodbye.
Unbelievable. Now think of the hardship and it tells you how long this went on. Does it say that it went on for, verse 25. It's for 7 days passed after the Lord had struck the Nile. In other words, before that water replenished itself and it became pure water again, was a total of 7 days. And in that time then, Pharaoh saw this happen. And in the very moment that it happened, and he didn't know how long this was going to last. But what does he do? I'll get water. They may not get water. The cattle may not get water, but I'll have water. Because why? I'm the king. I'm Pharaoh. And he was not concerned. That shows you his heart was what was hardened. Who did that? Did God inflict upon him, you won't have any concern? No, that was his choice. He had no concern. It shows you the heart of Pharaoh there. Okay. All right, now we're ready for 8. Any other thoughts on that before we move on?
Well, there were several, thus say the Lord, thus says the Lord, and I thought, that's like a big megaphone.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Yes.
So many subjects in this, layers and layers of. I got kind of stuck on, and Moses and Aaron did even as the Lord commanded. In 6, study on, and maybe we'll do this later, just focusing on Moses through all this.
Yeah.
What God did, what he did, what God did.
Yeah, how his servants responded, and what does that teach you and I, and how much faith did that require, and how much patience. And remember early on in this, what was Moses' response when he realized that they didn't have straw for their bricks? And now he went to God and petitioned in prayer. He's like, I did this to them because I obeyed you. But yet now what is he doing? He did exactly what God said. He was seeing the infliction of suffering, even in these first couple of plagues. They're going to affect the Israelites as well. And yet Moses has now learned, it doesn't matter, I will obey the Lord. Temporary suffering for long-term good is how God sees this, and it's how we should also, because sometimes especially if you have a mercy gift, you want to immediately solve the problems of people. You want to jump. I'm a helper. I'm not so much the mercy part of me, but I am a helper. I want to fix it. I want to say, does it hurt when you do that? Don't do that, right? I'm a little more pragmatic. That's not much of mercy in that. But I want to fix it. I want to say, if you just do this and not do that, then things are going to get better. But sometimes God says they got to go through it. I have a child, my son Eric, who I've talked about before, and he won't mind now because now he's in faith. But for years he rejected that. He would not listen if you just do what God says. Even, honestly, even if you don't come to follow God, doing God's will is always going to be a better path. But I want you to come to know that God is right and that you can trust him and that he wants what's good for you. And eventually, what you really ultimately want is for them to come to salvation, to have that eternal relationship with God and to be saved from the judgment of their own sin. But still, you have to sometimes step back and let God have the process with the person, because sometimes it takes them a long time. Some of them are like these magicians, and they're slower to get there. Some people are like Pharaoh and never get there. But what you really hope for is what happens with Egypt, is that on the whole, most of them got on board. There was a lot of grumbling, and we're going to see all that coming up later. But we see that on the whole, they were, at least initially, obeying God. And then God kept having to come back with more signs for them. Crazy. Okay, let's see. What do we see for keywords in chapter 8? Well, let's just list the two things that are going to happen. What are going to be the two signs? The first sign is going to be what?
The frogs.
Frogs. And what's the second one?
Gnats and flies.
And then the third one is flies. Okay, so there's going to be three signs, three more signs. So actually, if we want to number this correctly, this was the first sign. We really should say second, third, and fourth. Okay? Those are going to be your signs. Those are the ones we're going to be looking at here in this chapter. Hopefully this part is going to go much quicker than the last one. What is God's message on the whole in chapter 8?
Well, the words were entreaty, supplication. That seemed to be.
Say it again. Supplication.
Supplication, cry to the Lord, entreat
Mm-hmm.
of the Lord.
Okay. That's what Pharaoh keeps saying he wants done on his behalf.
Right.
But he's lying, because he doesn't. All he's doing is wanting relief from physical immediate suffering, but he doesn't want to actually change his heart, right? So entreat, that was another word. Cry to the Lord, entreat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the two phrases that I may know that you may know that I may know.
There you go. So let's just do our theme then. This is that purpose here. He says in this one, the Lord said to them to do what? What is his command? Let my people go that they may serve me. Okay, so now you know what the major theme is in chapter 8. Let my people go that they may serve me. And because they weren't being let go, God then inflicts these 3 more signs. The second sign, which is frogs, the third, which is gnats, and the fourth, which is the flies. In 1 to 15, let's do our paragraphs. Huh?
1 to 15.
Mm-hmm.
No, I said she's like, wow, look at everything together.
I am, because it's all on frogs. Thank you. I did it the easy way. I just took each, and then you can make sub-points to them, right?
But 1 through 7, he tells them what he's going to do, and 8 through
Yep.
9, he actually does it.
That's true.
It's still just
So he warns them, and then he does it, but it's about what subject? Which sign is it about? The frogs.
Did you draw a frog
I did.
on here?
Of course she did.
Of course. You want to see my frog? He's so cute. See my frog? Isn't he adorable? And then I did gnats over here. They're tiny little brown specks. They're flying everywhere. And then I did flies. Here's my fly. See my fly?
Oh, my God.
The big old fly. Now, that helped me, because by doing that, then I saw this progressive order. And you're right, Carol, if you want to break it down and make many more paragraph titles, please do that. That's fine. All you have to do is understand that each paragraph is to address the fact that the Lord said, let my people go that they may serve me. And the way that I handled this in order to simplify, because it gets real complicated otherwise, I think. It's easier if we start with 1 to 15, talking about that this is going to be the next sign he's going to do. He just did the other sign over here with the water and the blood. Now he's going to do this next sign on the frogs. And then I can make sub-points underneath that paragraph about that segment, that he warned them in the very first part, and then go from there. So he does warn them. So let's put that in there. If you refuse me, right? If you refuse me. In other words, I'm telling you, let my people go. But if you refuse me, and you will, I will do what?
Smite your whole territory.
Yep. I will swarm the territory with frogs. So now you can go underneath that and put all your points in there. God warned him. And that would maybe be verses, what you said, 1 through 7, right? 1 through 7. God warned Pharaoh. Then what did he do?
Then they made frogs.
Yeah. And so, in other words, apparently, although it doesn't say it in there,
Well, in 8 to 9, Pharaoh asks for Moses to entreat the Lord.
that's the response now. So what you see then in the verses 1 through 7 is God warned him. It doesn't say his heart hardened and that he refused, but he did, because starting in verse 8 is the response. The response is the frogs have come. He was warned they were going to come. He didn't heed the warning, so he failed. Pharaoh was warned. Pharaoh did not obey God, and therefore God sent frogs, right? It doesn't say any of those things there, but that we know it's true, because then it starts in verse 8. Then Pharaoh called for Moses. So it's almost like you skip that part of it and you go right into the next scene. Now Pharaoh says, come and take care of these frogs. right?
But he's actually asking for prayer.
I know it. Is that ever crazy?
It's wishy-washy.
Because they were in his bed.
Yeah, they were bothering him.
They were in his
It's not about the
bed.
people.
You know what this makes me think of is Judas, when it says Judas repented after he had betrayed Christ. But was he really sorry that he had betrayed Christ? No. We know that from the context, because the context tells us that he was a son of perdition, and I mean, it goes on and on. It gives a lengthy description of what he was like, and Jesus himself said unto him, basically, these things must happen, but woe unto him through whom they come. And so this is what we're seeing with Pharaoh. Woe unto you through whom these are going to come. You're petitioning me. Another one I thought of was when we did Ezekiel. Remember when the leaders of Judah kept coming to Ezekiel, petitioning that he would pray to the Lord? And they said, what? What is this? Talk to the hand. Talk to the hand. God says, I won't hear it. I won't hear your prayers. That's what we're seeing here.
For a long time, and you didn't want to talk.
Yeah, you didn't want to talk, and you're not, and not only that, but I've already told you what I want. Just do it, and then I will hear you. When you repent and obey, I will hear. There's another rabbit trail about prayer. How do you get prayer answered? When you obey God. Now, in this case, what God is doing is two things at once. He's not just addressing Pharaoh, he's addressing the bigger picture of long term, which is he wants Israel out. And this is about the redemption picture of justification, or of redemption, rather. And so here we see now Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron, and you were exactly right, Susan. He was annoyed. He was being put out. He was now feeling the suffering. How many of us have been watching on the news all these riotings and things that have gone on the streets here in America? When will that rioting stop? When it affects the people who are sending them out. When they are either not reaping the benefit of that riot, or that riot hurts them or someone they love. Then they're going to step back and say, okay, no more rioting. But until that happens, riot on. Right? Yeah. Pharaoh. That's Pharaoh right there for you. God warned Pharaoh. Pharaoh did not obey God. God sent the frogs. Now we say, now Pharaoh.
And don't forget that the magicians did this one too.
Yeah, hold on a second. Do I have that in here? Oh, yeah, we got, before we get to that part, we want to get the other part right. Well, okay, what part do you want to put in here, Chris?
Just because we were kind of tracking that the magicians did with their secret arts this frog thing.
Did the same. Okay, and with their, what does it call it, magic arts? Secret arts. And what verse is that?
7.
Verse 7, okay, thank you. And then Pharaoh, oh, actually, we're in the next paragraph for that part, right?
Well, you made it all 1 to 15.
I did. Oh, yeah, I did. You're right. Now,
There's a bold number on your paper.
now Pharaoh requests or petitions or asks for entreaty, right? Prayer, or supplication, he calls it, that the Lord remove the frogs. Okay, that was in verse 8. Okay. Now, Moses agrees, yes? And then he asks him a question, Pharaoh, when do you want this to happen? The honor is yours to tell me. When shall I entreat it for you? He said, actually, I think the translation, it says, oh, here it is. My pulpit commentary says, a better translation for when shall I entreat it for you, is for what date? At what time do you want this to actually transpire? And technically, I mean, really, he should say, now.
Exactly.
Right?
Why would you wait
But,
tomorrow?
But instead he says tomorrow. So what is God showing us in this? Yes, he has lost his mind. But again, when you are confronted with a truth message from the Lord, what is your response to God? Do you say, okay, I know you're right. I know you are who you are. I know what you want from me, but I'll make that decision tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. I'll put it off until tomorrow. And this is, I think, interesting that this is kind of dropped in here. And then that word tomorrow starts to show up over and over, where God says, on the morrow, God does, blah, blah, blah. And so he picks up on this particular thought pattern, which Pharaoh uses to basically put off God and put off dealing with whatever. But also, he has yet no concern for the people. And is saying, please do it like now. Like, how about yesterday? Instead, he says, tomorrow. No real urgency in the matter again. Pharaoh is now promised to let Israel go, right? He requests that he remove the frogs. He promises to let Israel go. And also in verse 8. And what does the Lord do?
Well, Moses and Aaron prayed to the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the Lord did what did according to the word of Moses.
Yep.
The frogs died. They just died, though. He didn't make them vanish.
I know. I love that. Okay.
Get up now.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, so Kristen just said, yeah, he did make the frogs die, but they all died in heaps and piles around, and the stench of them filled the land. What picture? Yeah. So when you think about the imagery of that, what is the picture of that concerning sin and concerning relationship with God? And concerning even coming into a relationship with God, have you ever made grievous mistakes? I want to call them mistakes generously. Have you sinned in a way that you've made such a mess of your life, and God will forgive you, and God will stop the pain from coming and building up? But what is sometimes left behind? Consequences. Sometimes the consequences of what you refused to do, and in your rebellion, and it stinks, right? And then it says in verse 13, the Lord did as Moses requested. So the frogs died. And then what did Pharaoh do?
Never mind my promise. I didn't mean it. I got what I wanted.
That is crazy, isn't it?
So I read that the frogs were thought to be gods, and
Yeah.
therefore they were not killed. And I thought it's so interesting that now Pharaoh wants to kill the frogs who are considered gods.
Yes.
He wants
Yes.
the gods to be killed.
And if you do if you spend the time in your homework time just to look at the Egyptian gods and what's going on in how this is being dealt with, that's a whole nother subject that can be expounded on, and you could go into another rabbit trail on. They are so interesting and they are so profound. Okay, so we're getting close to the 1 to 15. We're going to do 16 to 19. And in 16 to 19, we have what? It's a shorter paragraph. Are you happier? All right. 16 to 19 covers what particular sign?
Gnats.
The gnats. Now we've got the gnats sign, and that's going to be sign number 3. Okay? Okay, that's our next sign. What do we see going on in that particular storyline there? The narrative behind it. What's going on? Did anybody look at the subject matter of the dust of the earth? What's the imagery conveyed in that? Did anybody look at that by chance?
There's just so many. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was interesting. So I did look at it. Let me see here. The sign. So,
Abraham being promised generations.
as numerous as the sand of the seashore,
Dust of the earth.
as the dust. Yes, kind of the same exact thing. So I looked up the word dust. It's number 6083. It means dry earth, dust, powder. And then in the rest of the definition or explanation about the idea of dry earth and dust or powder is that this powder of the earth, this dust, serves as the symbol for abundance. It's a symbolic message of abundance. So when it says the dust of the earth, abundance. And what did we learn when we saw these gnats? They were where? Yeah, all, yes. And in the definition, they refer to them as huge swarms.
I read somewhere that maybe they were mosquitoes.
It's a combination of both, I think. Almost any kind of a small insect that swarms. So it could be along the lines of that, but they also said it can be the word lice. And fruit flies and other things, anything that bites. Because what is the outcome of it is that he stretched them out. They were gnats on man and beast. So whatever they were, they flew and they were on you and probably biting. Right? The dust of the earth became gnats all over the land. The magicians tried with their secret arts. What do we see here? They could not. So let's title this one then. Well, what did they respond? This is where we get to the good part. They could not. And when they could not, now this is the finger of God. So if you want to make a distinctive title on this, what might you title this one? How did the gnats come? By what? By the finger of God. Yeah. I mean, that'll give you by the finger of God, he brought gnats from the dust. Or you could say, then the finger of God. So that's your third sign, and that I titled it from that. And how did they come? From the dust. Meaning they were huge swarms. Because that word dust is number 6083, and it serves as a symbol. It's a symbol for abundance.
And this is, I think, the first sign where there wasn't a warning. It just did it.
Yes. And let me see if I could, did I mark that on here? I did not. But there is a delineation where, again, we see patterns. Do you remember, I know what it is, in the book of Revelation, when the letters are written to the 7 churches, there's a pattern of he condemns and then he exhorts and then he condemns and he exhorts each of these. So there's this pattern. We're going to see a pattern of that in here where he warns and then he just does, and then he warns and then he does. Or it might be he warns, he does. He warns, he does. Because he gets tired of warning and then he just does because they're not heeding the warning. Yeah. And I haven't looked at the pattern carefully. I haven't made a chart for myself on seeing it, but if you have time to do that, you should actually handle that because that would be good. On this one, the magicians tried but failed. (18 and 19), right? So that would be in contrast to before.
Yes.
They did, right? I'm going to give you the verses. In 7, 8 to 13, and then in 7, 14 to 25, they did, now they failed. Okay? So they cannot replicate. So now the magicians then tell him, they tell Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. Did anybody look at that subject matter about the finger of God?
I've got 676. It's like the hand, the power.
Very much like. So you can go back in what we've looked at so far and see every time when he speaks about by an outstretched arm or by the hand of God. Again, now stop and think about that. Every time he says, by an outstretched arm I will bring you out, right? By the hand of God, he's going to inflict certain plagues upon you. So what is the conveyed message in the hand or the outstretched arm? What's the message? Power. I always think about Jesus sitting at the right hand of the throne of God, right? So this is a statement that declares the true divine intervention of power. I'm going to put this on here. Declaring a true divine, and I say true deliberately because in contrast to what they were doing, this is a true divine intervention. It's a power beyond their capability. There was something else I had in my mind on this. What was it? Okay. Let's contrast then their secret arts and let's contrast that really quickly with the finger of God. Pretty good contrast, right? Right? And when you see their secret arts, tell me, how would you define their secret arts in comparison to the finger of God? Okay, demonic.
They're duplicating what God did.
Okay.
That's true, because they do it second.
And boy, are we going to see that at the end times, right? Is it true power? Is it excessive power? What kind of power is it? By the way, when you think about their gods, what are their gods? What does God tell us in His Word about other gods? Acts talks about it. They worship many gods, he says, as he walked through the streets, right?
No ears and eyes.
But their gods are no gods at all, right? So they're false gods. Now they have demonic power behind them that's true. There's the supernatural powers that are there, but the gods themselves are false gods, and they're weak. They're weaker, right? And over here we have the true God.
Well, and let's be clear, God is allowing the demons to do that.
Yes, yeah.
So their power
He's
is
giving,
still, like,
yeah,
God's allowing it to happen.
yeah,
If he
and
just had
allowed
powers for you demons, it wouldn't be here.
by God's permission.
And obviously he didn't allow them to do the plans.
Okay, and we have over here we have the true God. We see Him as the sovereign God, and we see Him also as a powerful Lord. So is God beginning to actually accomplish, at least on a small scale, what He has set out to do in this, which is that they will know that I am the Lord? We're already beginning to see an inkling of it. Now, Pharaoh's heart is not there yet, but already the magicians are beginning to say, whoa, okay, we think we've met our match here. This is something we cannot do. And one of the things I did listen to by a pastor was that the idea of gnats. Gnats and lice make a person unclean, and they are a stickler for cleanliness. And it's one of the reasons they shaved their heads and shaved all their body. Clean, clean, clean. It's kind of an imitation again of what God is going to give to Egypt about the cleanliness and the washings and so forth before they would enter to serve him. But they would, because of the gnats and the flies, then they have been made what? Unclean. And now they can't even go and worship their gods because they're covered with gnats and sores, and now they're unclean. I thought that was very interesting. Okay, so there's that third sign. Yet, what do we know about Pharaoh?
Hardened his heart. Heart was hardened.
His heart was hardened, and
He did not listen.
yeah, he did not listen.
Something to do with heart and ears.
Okay, we got 20 to 24. I'm going to have to expedite this, I think. How far am I? Oh, I'm right at the mark now. Okay, so now what's he going to do?
What?
I will send flies. Any warning? No warning on this one, right? I think that's correct. So now he just does it. So he hardened his heart. He doesn't tell him I'm going to do this. He just says, now go and do this. Now the Lord said to Moses, rise early in the morning. Oh, no, he does. He says, present yourself to Pharaoh as he comes out of the water and say to him, thus says the Lord, let my people go that they may serve me. For if you do not, I will send swarms of flies. So he does warn him. God warns. Let my people go. Again, same subject matter. And if you do not, what?
Flies.
I will send flies. And that was in verse 21. Thank you. Okay. So we have a warning from God here. And when he sends this one, though, now there's going to be something different about this one. What does he say he's going to do, starting in 22 and 23?
He sets apart the land of Goshen.
Yeah. God will make a division, first of all. Between God's people and who?
Your people.
Yep, the people of Pharaoh. Oh, man. Okay, so tell me, what do you see here spiritually? Who is Pharaoh a type of?
The world.
The world is one, yes. Also, who is he? He's the first one that's really clearly depicted. What is coming at the end time? The Antichrist, okay? And what is the power behind the Antichrist? Satan. So if this is the people of Pharaoh, between God's people, and God has said, I'm going to make a division. That's a really interesting point, I think. God will make a division, and division means what? Did anybody look it up? There's so much to cover. I wish we had just one chapter, and I would have been much quicker, but as it is. Anybody do division? Okay, 6304, it means a judgment based on a difference. Judgment based on a distinction. This makes me think of Leviticus. You will discern the clean from the unclean, right? So we're beginning to see already God picturing a little bit of what he's going to do with Israel when he gives her covenant and the law, and this idea making distinction between the clean and the unclean. Here, it's a distinction that's being made. God's people versus the people of Pharaoh. The children of God versus the children of the world. Pharaoh, the world. He's the world, or he's Satan.
Like the sheep and the goats.
Right? Okay, and then the next one, he says, and I will set apart. The land. That's interesting. So it's not just for the people. Now it's about the land of Goshen. Do you know how they got into Goshen?
Joseph.
Yeah, very interesting. And how did they get that land granted to them? Do you remember anything about the land of Goshen? Just it was beautiful. It was rich. It was capable of growing beautiful things, and it was basically it was the best of the land. Why did they get the best of Egypt? Joseph's work of saving, and God, the hand of God being upon all that. So they were in captivity, but they got the best of Egypt. And now God's saying, I'm going to preserve my people's best place. What picture is that for you? Israel, the land of Israel, or the other place. Where's the other promised land? Heaven. So it's all these spiritual pictures of God saying, these are my people. I am setting them apart. I am going to keep basically the bad out, only the good, and these are going to be the good for my people, and I will not allow any infliction of my judgments upon them. So I will set apart the land of Goshen, and it's contrasted with the land where the Egyptians lived.
That must have been such a relief to the Israelites.
Oh, thank goodness. I mean, we're done with those plagues. Well, until they get to the end, then there's going to be another one. But okay, I will set apart the land. So set apart, number 6395. I won't write it down because of time. To be distinct, marked out, to be distinguished. Again, it just makes me think of how God sets us apart, right?
What was the first thing you said? Read the definition one more time.
To be distinct
Okay.
and marked out, or be distinguished. It's basically the same thing as division. It's just in this case it's about the land, where before it was about the people, so now we're going to have both. Okay, the last paragraph is 25 to 32, and we're all done. This one is Pharaoh's response to all this going on here. What do we see Pharaoh doing here?
Go.
Just go, I want you out of here. But that's not really all of it, is it? What does he tell him in the going?
You could go, but you could sacrifice to your God here.
Yes.
Go where you want to, where God is sending you. You just do it here.
Exactly. So what I want you to notice here is he gives two negotiation moves right here. Compromises. You may, but. And then he gives them an ultimatum of how they're going to be able to do this. So Pharaoh in here, I just put it this way. Pharaoh negotiates compromise. And that always sounds good, right? No, not in this case. In order to do what? Yeah, but what are they going to go to do? They're going to go to serve the Lord. And translate that for me. What does it mean to go serve the Lord? They're going to go worship the Lord. Now this starts a whole nother topical study here that could be so good. When you look at this, there are going to be 4 negotiation moves that he makes. I want you to pay attention to them. I've already looked at all of them because that's how I ended up going ahead. But you're going to see in chapter 10, there's 2 more of these negotiation pleas. The first 2 are here, though. Let's do the first 2. The first one is what?
Here.
Yeah. You may go, but, and then what he says, within the land. And what had God said? Go 3 days journey from here, right? to the place I shall show you, which actually was going to be Mount Sinai. Okay? Moses expresses an objection because he wants them to worship within the land. And when they worship within the land and he starts to sacrifice cattle, as the God will command them, what is his objection with him?
Well, that's an abomination to the Egyptians.
Apparently, the Egyptians didn't like that. It's kind of like the Hindu faith system. They worship the cows, so they have a worship system of the cattle, right? Is it on? Yeah, it's on here.
If we do that, then the Egyptians are going to kill us.
Right. So we're going to, yes, exactly. So the Egyptians will likely bring death upon them if they do that. And he recognized that. So he throws that out to Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh says, okay, well, then you may go, but what?
Not very far.
But, yeah, not very far away. So I listened to a lovely sermon by a pastor I've never heard before this week, and he went through all four of these, negotiation pleas, and talked about our faith journey with God. When you come into faith with God, do you fully obey God? Do you go so he talked about this, you can go but do it within the land. So when you become a Christian, do you stay in the land of the unclean? I mean, he does a beautiful, I can share him with you. Yes, I have him. I can share him with you. But I just thought if I could just give you a taste of kind of that thinking, once you get all four of these negotiations, then consider it in light of your relationship with God. When you come into relationship with God, and God says, "Thus saith the Lord," this is you shall. You only come to the Father through the Son, right? There's no way unto the Father except through the Son. So if God says, this is how you must come, when you come to him, are you doing it his way? And in this case, he said, they are to come 3 days' journey out to worship me here. And now Pharaoh, Satan, he will tempt you and he will say, well, but do you have to do it that way? Do you have to go that far, right? So it's that kind of thinking. It's this negotiation that says, yes, I will let you worship the Lord, but you still belong to me. And you'll do it my way rather than God's way. Bye, Mia. Okay, so just consider those thoughts. I'm not going to have time to cover that. Obviously, we're out of time. But I just thought that was very, very interesting. Very interesting. God's choice for the place of worship, by the way, becomes another possible journey to go on. When God said you have to go to the place that I have told you, when you go into, like, for instance, in Deuteronomy, it's the place that God shall choose that you shall worship the Lord. Not under every tree of other pagan ways of worship, but you will do it by Jerusalem. In this place, it shall be provided, right? And in this place you shall come. You shall not go to any other place. Here you must come. And you must make this journey for each of these feasts that I have designated. We're going to see all this later as we go on. So this kind of thing, I think, lays on top of this idea with this very first part where he says you can go but do it within my land. And you cannot go very far, but he's saying, no, you must do it in the place that I have designated. I think that's another possible rabbit trail to go on, to look at how Satan is very tricky in the way that he wants to negotiate with us how we're going to worship the Lord. Okay, so we barely really touched all the things. Did anybody have any other thoughts? No?
Well, here's 30, verse 30, Moses prays, the Lord removes it from blindness.
But then Pharaoh does what? Hardens his heart again. Can add that on there. Underneath every one of these, Pharaoh hardens his heart again, right?
Moses makes supplication, but it doesn't say that Pharaoh actually asks, does it?
No, but
He's like, maybe it's because he's in the negotiating phase where he's like, well, I'm going to let you go.
then Moses said, behold, I am going out from you, and I shall make supplication. Verse 28. Do you see it?
Okay.
Carol? 8:28. Pharaoh said, I will let you go, that you may sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness. Only you shall not go very far and make supplication. Oh,
Right there, make supplication, so then he goes and he
Make supplication for me. Yeah.
Again, he's a father.
So he is asking. So there's a pattern going on here. As soon as he's under any kind of pain or discomfort, he wants it to go away. So there's another picture about how some people approach God. Just go to God when you're in trouble. Ask him to take care of the mess. As soon as God takes care of the mess, then where are you? You're right back to a hardened heart again, because you don't actually submit to God. There's some beautiful pictures in here about salvation and our journey and how it must be and how we seem to always want it. Right? Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming and joining with us on these 2 chapters. We'll do the next 2 chapters, 9 and 10, next week.